Pararam pam pararam. 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 Kam karam karam pedaram karam kam karam karam pedaram karam kam karam karam pedaram karam Як ішов селом я в літнє надвечір'я, вітер капелюха звіяв на подвір'я. Мого капелюха покотив подвір'я. Дівчина із хати глянула й метнулась, дала капелюха й весело сміхнулась. Дала капелюха і мені всміхнулась. Йду сьогодні знову вітру, вже немає свого капелюха, сам туди кидаю, йду сьогодні, вітру немає, кидаю капелюх, сам кидаю, вітру вже немає в серці, завірюха дівчини, не видно, йду за капелюхом, усім курам насміх сам за капелюхом. Капелюх, капелюх, кап, кап, капелюх, капелюх, кап, кап, капелюх, капелюх, кап, кап, капелюх. Кап, кап, капелюх, капелюх, кап, кап, капелюх, капелюх, кап, кап, капелюх, капелюх. Парарам, пам, парарам, парарам, пам, парарам, парарам, пам, парарам.
From Ukraine, Pikardiska Teretsia, very popular group that's been around a long, long time. Great a cappella, mostly a cappella. They do some with instruments, but mostly a cappella. Live performances, still doing it, still going strong. They've made dozens, I think, of recordings. And that song you just heard was Kapeluch, or Cap. Добрий вечір, шановні радіослухачі, та вітаю вас всіх на радіопередачу «Наш Холос» радіо українського коріння, котра подається вам на багатомовній радіостанції AM-1320 CHMB у місті Ванкувері і по мережі PCJ Радіо міжнародному. При мікрофоні Павліна Макорі, дякую, що рішили перебути зі мною наступну годину. Hello there and welcome to Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio, coming to you here on AM 1320 CHMB Vancouver and in international syndication on PCJ Radio International. I'm your host, Paula Demchuk-Makori, Pokrinske Pavlina. Thank you so much for joining me. We've got a great program lined up for you. I'm excited to finally bring you an interview with Stefan Andrusiak, who hosts a show called Nasha Kasha out of London, Ontario. He's based there. His show is heard on many campus radio stations in his local area, Southern Ontario, and moving across Canada as well, westward as far as British Columbia, the West Coast, Vancouver Island. It now airs in Nanaimo. It's been a long time coming, but we finally caught up, and he'll be telling us all about himself, his past, and his involvement with one of Canada's top polka groups from Montreal, Rush Nichuk, and, of course, all about his new show, not so new now. It's going on 4 years, Nasha Kasha, a Ukrainian almanac. So stay tuned for that. We've also got our usual proverb of the week, other items of interest, and great Ukrainian music. And coming up next is a group from Ukraine, a girl group from Lviv. They are called Lubistok. Here they are with a traditional Ukrainian folk song, Chicheri.
Марічко, чечері, 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 розчеши ви кучері, 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 розчеши ви кучері, кучері, кучері. Я Варварі чесала, 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 якби мати не знала, не знала, не знала, якби мати не знала, не знала, не знала. Мати буде дивити, 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 я забуду ганьбити, 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 я забуду ганьбити, ганьбити, ганьбити. Ой, Марічко, люблю тя, люблю тя, люблю тя, заріж мені когутя, 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 заріж мені когутя, когутя, когутя. А як голос запіє, 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 стави рано, Маріє, 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 стави рано, Маріє, Маріє, Маріє. Чичері, чичері,
Thanks to the foresight and generosity of its donors, the Shevchenko Foundation has been investing in the future of the Ukrainian-Canadian community for over 50 years. Since 1963, the Shevchenko Foundation has been funding initiatives that strengthen our Ukrainian-Canadian identity and enhance our Ukrainian-Canadian cultural heritage. These include fine and performing arts and arts groups, museums, cultural centers, education, as well as authors, journalists, and the Ukrainian-Canadian media, including this program. The foundation strives to become the premier not-for-profit foundation in Canada, which acknowledges the Ukrainian-Canadian community as a fundamental component of Canadian society. Nash Holos listeners are encouraged to support this vision through continued donations into the future. To apply for grants, make a donation, or for more information, visit ShevchenkoFoundation.com.
гаєм, та й жалібно плаче. Ходить дівка тихим гаєм, та й жалібно плаче.
Пускає мене мати вранці до криниці, ані жито жати, ані лену брати, ні на вечорниці, ані жито жати, ані лену брати, ні на вечорниці. Увечері пізненько, як мати заснула, вийшла слухать соловейка, мов зроду не чула. Вийшла слухать соловейка, мов зроду не чула. Йшла, стала під вербою, та й дивлюся в воду. Тяжко, важко світі жити, сироті без роду. Тяжко, важко в світі жити, сироті без роду.
Летить галка через балку, літаючи пряче. Ходить дівка тихим гаєм, та й жалібно плаче. Ходить дівка тихим гаєм, та й жалібно плаче.
From Montreal, that was Chetam Shena with a song of lyrics that were penned by Taras Shevchenko, and they recorded that song with Mark Bednarchuk, who is with Previts, and that was done many years ago on a vinyl recording, and I love it as much now as I did when I first heard it back in the, probably 1980s. That was Lititalka Cheres Balku, A Jackdaw Flies Over the Ravine, performed by Chetam Shena and Mark Bednarchuk. Before them, you heard the Canadian Banduras Capella from Toronto and another Shevchenko tune, and you'll be hearing more of them because next month, starting tomorrow, is Shevchenko month. This song that you just heard by the Canadian Banduras Capella was Harai Kobzariu, Play Kobzar. We're going to keep it in Canada now. We've got a group from Saskatoon, and this is another one, recording that goes back quite a while, early 1990s, I think. They are Lazdilka, Ukrainian Orthodox Choir and Orchestra, and here they are now with Kozachka Tvoya. You are my sweetheart, my Cossack sweetheart.
Мені є зоря і за обрій рука, місяця лукочего на боки. Я козачка твоя, я дружина твоя, пане полковнику, мій сеньокі. Я козачка твоя, я дружина твоя, пане полковнику,
It was December of 1969, and my father, a co-owner in a Montreal restaurant, asked if I could get some musicians together to play at a New Year's party. I had played at weddings with Andriy Harasimovich and Yurko Shtik. I also had heard that a fellow student named Euhano Sidach played accordion and had a beautiful tenor. I always liked the mandolin, so I also invited a classmate named Mike to attend our first practice. It was at the Uno Hall in Montreal, where I had played for the Marunchak Ukrainian dancers. 4 of us arrived on time, but no mandolin. The hall was unlocked and we began to play this song. It's from the Marunchak stage show repertoire. Dancers would enter to a galloping step as though they were on horseback, whistling. It's called Zasvistali Kozachenki, the Whistling Cossacks. Little did we know that while we were whistling, the caretaker had locked the door behind us. We could leave, but no one else could enter. Mike showed up, knocked, heard us practicing, and then left frustrated, and more than a bit put off, probably thinking how thoughtless we were. And so it was that the four of us began Rushnichok. 4 guys, 1 band, no mandolin. But we could whistle. And there's a footnote. We would later be told, after having recorded Zasvestale Kozachenke, that it wasn't Zasvestale at all, but Zasvitstale. In other words, it isn't that the Cossacks could whistle, but that they would survive and rise up again beyond the borders of Ukraine. Here from Volume 2, with apologies to all Ukrainian scholars, the Whistling Cossacks, Zasvistale Kozachenke.
Засвистали козаченьки, поки до півночі заплакала Марусенька свої карі очі, заплакала Марусенька свої карі очі. Не плач, Марусенько, не плач, не журися, а за свого миленького Богу помолися, а за свого миленького Богу помолися. Стоїть місяць над горою, та сонця немає, мати сина в доріженьку слізно проводжає, мати сина в доріженьку слізно проводжає.
Віхав козак за Дунай, сказав дівчино прощай, і конику вороненький неси та гуляй. Постій, козаче, твоя дівчина плаче, як ти мене покидаєш, тільки подумай. Постій, козаче, твоя дівчина плаче, як ти мене покидаєш, тільки подумай. Білих ручок не ламай, ясних очок не стирай, мене з війни заставою собі ожидай. Не хочу я нікого, тільки тебе одного, ти будь здоров, мій миленький, а все пропадай. Не хочу я нікого, тільки тебе одного, ти будь здоров, мій миленький, а все пропадай. Їхав козак за Дунай, сказав дівчино прощай, ти конику вороненький неси та гуляй. Постій, козаче, твоя дівчина плаче, як ти мене покидаєш, тільки подумай. Постій, козаче, твоя дівчина плаче, як ти мене покидаєш, тільки подумай.
From a Ukrainian duo called Dva Yurka, which translates as 2 Georges. And that's 2 guys playing probably about, 5 or 6 instruments between them. And amazing group that was traditional Ukrainian folk song. Yichał Kozak za Dunaj, a Cossack went riding off beyond the Danube. Coming up next, something brand new. This is the 2020 entry by Ukraine into Eurovision. The group is called Go A, and it is called Solovey, Nightingale.
Ходила я в долину по червоною калину, ой, ходила я в долину по червоною калину, назбирала квіточок, заплетала віночок, родає марвіночок, а до мене Ванюша, я загаю поспіша, а до мене Ванюша, ти Катруся хороша, мила моя Катруся. Я з тобою люблюся, поки не знаматуся. Соловей, соловей, не співай раненько, а мені на серденько знов невеселенько. Соловей, соловей, ой, як мені буде, міла його полюбити, не вміла забути. Якби я того не знала, то з тобою б не гуляла, не ходила б долину, не ламала б калину. Я з тобою люблюся, поки не знаматуся, а як познаматуся, то розійдемося. Не співай раненько, щось невеселенько. Соловей, соловей, не співай раненько, а мені на серденько знов невеселенько. Соловей, соловей, ой, як мені буде, міла його полюбити, не вміла забути. Соловей, соловей, не співай раненько, бо мені на серденько знов невеселенько. Соловей, соловей, ой, як мені буде, міла його полюбити, не вміла забути.
This is CHMB, AM 1320, Vancouver.
Every day, more Ukrainian soldiers are killed or wounded by Russian invaders. You can help wounded heroes by joining the Adopt a Soldier program of registered charity Ukraine War Amps. A small monthly donation goes very far for medical services and living expenses and creates a special bond between you and a wounded hero. 100% of your contribution goes to the soldier. Please, adopt a soldier today. Visit ukrainewaramps.ca or find us on Facebook.
Ukrainian Jewish Heritage is a bi-weekly series sponsored by the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter based in Toronto, featuring stories of Ukrainians and Jews working together in solidarity and harmony to restore and strengthen centuries-old bonds and affinities nearly destroyed by hostile outside forces in the bloody 20th century and even today. Tune in next week for another episode of Ukrainian Jewish Heritage, brought to you by the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter here on Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio.
Євген Андрій, наша пісня, рідний стрій, ми хлопці із Канади, рушничок, ми хлопці із Канади, гей-гей, гей-гей, не звикли до паради, гей-гей, гей-гей, бажаємо лиш одне з тим все, скромне, щире, і це все, ми хлопці із Канади, гей-гей, гей-гей, рушничок. із Канади. Гей, 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 гей.
Stefan Andrusiak is well known in the Ukrainian-Canadian community as a musician with one of Canada's iconic Zabava bands, Rushnachok, a broadcaster with two of Canada's big networks, CBC and CTV, and a Ukrainian community activist and leader in his home community of London, Ontario. He's now retired, as have his fellow Rushnachok members, but in his retirement, he's happily found a new hobby that marries his professional broadcast career past and his love of Ukrainian culture, particularly the Canadian variety. This new hobby is a radio show and podcast called Nasha Kasha, a spoken word show which is syndicated on close to 20 campus radio stations, mostly in southern Ontario, but also in BC, including Nanaimo's campus radio station, which airs Nash Holos as well. So joining us now to tell us about his show, its origins, and his plans for it in the future, and maybe to reminisce a little bit about the good old days, is Stefan Andrusiak. Stefan, welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Hi, Paulina. I'm back.
You're back, yeah.
I'm back in the big time on Nash Holos.
Oh, wow. You're too funny. So much to talk about. Let's start with Nasha Kasha. Maybe just a bit about you first.
Well, I said that opening line jokingly, but also very, very warmly, because you ran segments that I used to produce called Rushnachok stories. That's what I meant by being back.
Yeah, 40 of them. They were great. They got a lot of airplay on Nash Holos, and it was really nice to see that. The kind of a resurrection, not really, but it was recollection, I guess maybe would be a better word. And because you know what I noticed with Rushnachok online years ago, when, it was just everybody was piling on the internet, and there was this Rushnachok fan club on Facebook, everywhere, and I thought, wow, this is great, because you guys disbanded when?
Oh my gosh, it's been decades. You know that this is the 50th anniversary of us starting as a band this year.
No way.
We played for the first time on New Year's Eve, 1969, at a restaurant called La Steppe, and they wanted to throw a New Year's party. And actually, my father was one of the partners in La Steppe, and he asked if I could bring together a few of my musician friends. And we came together and we just hit it off from the very beginning. And New Year's Eve, 1969, that was our debut. So this is the big 5-0 for Rushnachok.
That's amazing. And I know you did Rushnachok's story on it, and we replayed it recently when we introduced your new show, your new hobby, Nasha Kasha, on CHLY in Nanaimo just last week.
My mother used to tell my father that you mean Fiola Maya, whenever he got lost in a project that just overtook his passions and his concentration. And so I guess this is more than a hobby. It's my fiole, this Nasha Kasha.
So tell us at the beginning, what brought it on? You retired in, what, about 2015? And what?
Well, I worked for CTV National News as a young man, fresh out of grad school, and then worked for the CBC and in Edmonton, Windsor, Ontario, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Toronto. And so I've seen a lot of this country, and I also taught media and ethics in London. This is what brought me to London for 5 years. And I've always wanted to not let go of reporting, because I ran newsrooms in 2 provinces, and that was great to oversee editorial skills and to work with great and talented reporters. But I'd never really lost my zest for reporting in the field. And so I was looking for a vehicle that would take me back into that kind of thing. And I don't make any money on it. There are no commercials in Nasha Kasha. I don't take money for any of the stories that I do, but it allows me to have a backstage pass to life. You think of a topic, you telephone someone, you knock on a door, and before you know it, you're speaking with someone that really in another time and space you would never meet. And that's really what fires me. That's what I want to do for as long as I can with the rest of my life. You can call it a hobby, you can call it a passion. I want to take what I did well professionally and now do it just because I love it. And where best to do it, in my case, than around the culture that I grew up in, the people, and examining issues and asking some hard questions, but also bringing some compassion and understanding. And I think I have all of those. And hence you have Nasha Kasha. Kasha is a mess. Life is a mess. It's not perfect, but it's warm and it's nourishing and it's so good for you if you get involved in it. And that's why I call it Kasha. Nasha, just as Nash Holos is our voice, Nash Holos. Nasha Kasha, it's our Kasha. It's our little mess. And whenever I tell somebody, well, what's the name of your show, Stefan? Well, it's Nasha Kasha. It always brings a smile to people's faces.
Well, I mean, kasha is a favorite food, I think, of most Ukrainians. And it's a good name, and you've also got kind of a subtitle, too, don't you? Tell us about how you came up with that.
Well, you see, I came up with the thought of calling the show Kasha. And I went, as you do, you search to see that you're not using somebody else's name. And lo and behold, in Eastern Europe, there is a klezmer band, Kasha,
no
Nasha.
Way. No way!
Yeah,
really?
And they're excellent. And I've communicated with them, and I told them about my show, and can I use your music? And they said yes. Kasha Nasha, listen to them. They're wonderful. They've even got a song called Carpathian Carnival.
No way! Wow.
Oh, beautiful klezmer music, and so I've used it on occasion.
Okay.
So that's the Nasha Kasha piece. But I also couldn't make up my mind because I was a fan of the almanac format that Garrison Keillor, well, before he had to leave his program, performed for public radio. And I've always wanted to do an almanac kind of stories about just life. You kick back and you can have some serious issues and some serious discussions, but sometimes you laugh. And I think we need to laugh along with our neighbors and explain who it is that we are, this Ukrainian thing that we're so in love with. What's that all about? And so, just like your show, it's in the English language. Mind you do have Ukrainian segments in yours. I speak to a general audience. And I said to my friend who's in broadcasting, I said, I'm torn between Nasha Kasha and the idea of calling my show Ukrainian Almanac. And he says, well, call them both. Join the names. Nasha Kasha, Ukrainian Almanac.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So it's called Nasha Kasha, Ukrainian Almanac in full. But most of my listeners know it as Nasha Kasha without the last part. And my friends and family, they say, well, how's Kasha going? So you've got it all.
So tell us when it started and how.
Well, I applied to, because you do have to apply as a volunteer to the local radio station. On campus at Western University. It was CHRW 94.9 FM. The corporate name is Radio Western. So I applied to Radio Western. I spoke with Andrew Barton, the station manager, and he says, yeah, sure. But you're going to have to go through all the training, even though I spent a lifetime in broadcasting and news. And I said, fine. I mean, I'm a volunteer. I've got to pass muster. And so they gave me the 9-page policy book, and I came in to take tutorials with them, and they showed me studio procedure because I didn't know that. And Andrew is a jazz and blues aficionado, and you should see this. You should see this man put a vinyl record on a turntable. It's like this act of reverence, and he's so good, and he's so knowledgeable. And as a result of hanging out with the gang at Radio Western, I have such a high opinion of the volunteers, some of whom have spent decades, like you, Paulina, doing their program dependably without, there may be a week where they're not feeling well or they're away on vacation and they'll do a rerun. But for decades, you say, oh, Stefan, you've done what is it, your 195th show? Well, that's nothing compared to the fellow who for so many years at Radio Western preceded my program, doing the Spanish show for an hour and a half every Sunday, and he was just fantastic, and he's still doing it. So more power to all of the people. And if anybody out there listening has ever wanted to do a program on, I don't know, old rock and roll LPs or some other kind of sidebar issue, go to your radio station, your community radio station, and let them know. I wanted to do an independent program because the stories that I find are more often than not people who wouldn't get a second notice from a journalist, and also they may not think their story is important enough. And I believe that everybody's got a story to tell, and it's in these little stories, in the day-to-day life worked and lived well, that I think we can all learn something from. And I don't usually play full musical pieces on my show, but I will weave in some elements that musically that would fit to reinforce the story that I'm doing.
So tell us about some of these stories. This last week was all about accordion music, and last week was a judge.
Bogdan Fute is a federal court judge in the United States. He worked in Washington, D.C. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan. And the reason I look to him, other than the fact that he's of Ukrainian background and heritage, is that he has been pivotal as an advisor to Ukraine as it became independent all those years, and he's seen it go through Yushchenko and Yanukovych and now Zelensky, and he has, sometimes through legal conferences in Ukraine, sometimes through initiatives that the United States government has put together, sometimes the Ukrainian World Congress, he has been very active all the way through, and I thought he would be a fascinating subject. He's now of a retirement age, but he still works as a judge 3 days a week. It's really quite fascinating. So I look at a character like that, and I use that term fondly, and with respect. And I think, well, I've got some questions to ask, and so I did a profile of him. The one that you referred to as an accordion, I reflected on my youth, my tortured youth, not wanting to learn the accordion, and how my father had different ideas, and how I eventually became a drummer, and how he and I made peace. And not only that, he loved the music that I was a part of, and that grew into Rushnichok. I was the drummer for Rushnichok for, we only had 4 members. Andriy passed away last June.
That was
so
sad.
There are now three of us. Yeah, he didn't get to see the 50th anniversary of our band, which started New Year's Eve, 1969 in Montreal at a club called La Steppe.
So that was the 2 stories so far that have aired in Nanaimo. Some of the other stories, though, the other 193, and then maybe the ones that you're looking for in the future. Tell us a little bit about those.
Well, I'll tell you the ones that I did in British Columbia. Larissa and I took a week, and a cheap flight. Swoop flies from, this is not a commercial, but it flies directly from London, Ontario, where I live, to Abbotsford, BC. And I thought, heck, let's just do this. And I flew to Abbotsford. Why Abbotsford? Because Nash Holos is heard on CIVL FM in Abbotsford.
Perfect.
And so I landed there, and they had a country fair, and I went to the country fair with my microphone, and I said, hey, I do this show, would you let me in? And they said, yes, come on in. And I walked over to the food concession, and there was this lady with a food truck, and she sold pierogies, and she was from Chilliwack, and she'd been doing it for 20 years.
Of course
she was selling her truck, and I said, that's a story. and so we went up north to Kamloops, and we met with the Pokotilo Ukrainian dancers. And I didn't know what a Pokotilo was, but it's a tumbleweed.
Oh.
And Kamloops has tumbleweeds. On the roads, you'll see them, although in British Columbia, it has a desert-like climate. And so I met the Pocatello dancers, and I did a story about them. And And we went to Vernon, and I did a story about someone who was interested in Ukrainian grave sites. And why was she interested? Well, because an ancestor of hers was an internee at the infamous internment camps that Ukrainians were sent to as prisoners during World War I for no other reason than they were of Ukrainian descent, and they held an Austrian passport. Why did they hold an Austrian passport, which was the enemy? They held an Austrian passport because that part of Ukraine they were from was under Austria's rule when they emigrated. It had nothing to do with the war, but they were interned. So I did a story. I did a story in Vernon, and then we went to Kelowna and another dance group there, and then to Penticton. And I didn't have anything set up, so we pull in and into our motel room, and I'm looking at the newspaper, and I said, "Larissa," and she rolls her eyes. She knows that look. I go, "Oh, Larissa, how would you like to go to a gospel revival tonight?" She goes, "What?" There was a Seventh-day Adventist church in Penticton, just a few blocks from our hotel, and they were hosting the Malachenko Gospel Singers, a family that grew up in Saskatchewan. The father had such a good voice that he was discovered by a religious broadcaster in the U.S., was brought to Los Angeles in the days of live radio, and eventually he brought his entire family up to be singers. And they gave me a wonderful interview, And then down to Oliver, which is just south of Penticton, to a winery called Stone Boat. And I thought a stone boat was a concrete boat. I know people do build concrete boats.
You didn't grow up on the prairies then.
No, well, but you know what a stone boat is, and I didn't. Now I do. A stone boat is what's pulled by horses, and people who did the back-breaking labor of clearing fields would put rocks on the back of into this thing they called a boat. And until they felt, well, this isn't fair to the horse anymore, they take it to the side of the field, dump the rocks, and then come back and keep going. And he grew up on such a farm. He was proud of his heritage, and he named his winery Stone Boat, and they now win awards for their wines. So again, I don't take money for the stories I do. It just happened that there was a winery, and these were interesting people, and I thought their voices should be heard.
Well, fascinating stories, and you've got coming up to 200 of them, and sounds like you'll be having many, many more. So for those that have just tuned in now, haven't heard of Nash Holos, how can they find you online? Because you've got, all these are archived, right?
They are. Nash Holos has a Facebook page, and they are there, so the links are there. You click them and you can hear the stories, or they're on iTunes and many other podcast providers. Go to the Apple iTunes store, type in Nash Holos, and you can subscribe for free, and you'll get, every week you'll get the Nash Holos episode.
Perfect.
Or better still, listen to
CHLY.
Yes.
Comes right after Nash Holos at 12:30 Wednesdays. Nash Holos starts at 11 from 11 to 12:30. So it's a great marriage. Two great names, I think. And
well, you know, Paulina, I'm so privileged that you would think to hook up with me in this way.
Well, why not?
You've been doing this for what, 3 decades, maybe longer?
Yeah, it's 30 years since Nash Holos started.
Yeah. So congratulations on that. And you know, I think it will work very, very well.
Yeah. So again, it's Nash Holos, and you can search for it on iTunes, search for it on Facebook, any of your podcast apps. You do have an RSS feed, so people can find the feed. All they have to do is search for it. So
yes, they can do that.
Okay, and hopefully next time you're on the West Coast, you'll pop into Nanaimo. Try to make it on a Wednesday and come in and sit in on the studio with us and do some live radio again.
Well, Larissa has a conference in Vancouver in late March, at the end of March. I plan to come down with her,
and I hope to come to Nanaimo to see you.
Perfect. Oh, that would be just awesome. So thanks so much for taking the time, Stefan, to tell us about Nash Holos, a bit about yourself, and reminisce about old times. And looking forward to seeing you in person in about a month's time or so here on the West Coast in Nanaimo.
Be well.
And the inimitable Rushnichuk with a song about the mosquito and the fly, Komarik. And before the interview with Stefan, you heard Rushnichuk's probably signature song, Chłopcy iz Kanady, Canada's Rushnichuk. And just a reminder that you can now listen to Nash Holos here on the West Coast. The signal for the Nanaimo show on CHLY does reach into Vancouver. So tune in Wednesdays at 11 o'clock for Nash Holos and at 12:30 for Nash Holos with Stefan Andrusiak, Wednesdays on CHLY 101.7 FM. And as you heard in the interview, we're expecting to bring you more from Stefan in about a month's time or so. Meanwhile, you've been listening to Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio, our flagship show in Vancouver, here on AM 1320 CHMB Vancouver, and in international syndication on PCJ Radio International. In between broadcasts, please visit us online at www.nashholos.com, where you'll find transcripts and archived audio files, a link to the Nash Holos podcast and information about the show, as well as a link to our Patreon site, where you can support our work if you like. На жаль, ми вже скінчили нашу програму, вже час додому і сказати до побачення, але перед тим я хочу залишити вас такими словами мудрості. Добре слово робить багато. And our proverb of the week translates as, a good word does a great deal of work. And with that, we've come to the end of our show. So to wrap things up, we have the By Request Band from Steinbach, Manitoba, and Peter's Special. I'm Pavlina. On behalf of all of us here at Nash Holos and AM 1320, thanks for listening and dobranic! Hi, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the show. If you're not yet a Patreon supporter of Nash Holos, I hope you'll consider becoming one today, with the digital equivalent of a cup of coffee once or twice a month, or maybe even a snack or a meal. There's an option for every budget, and even $1 a month tells me you value the show and my efforts to produce and bring it to you. Becoming a Patreon supporter will give you the opportunity to provide feedback to help me improve the show, create cool swag to promote it, and swap ideas on how to promote Ukrainian culture in between broadcasts and podcasts. Your contribution will also help to preserve a well-established on-air and online venue of 30 years running to continue promoting Ukrainian culture and heritage long after I've retired. Your contribution will help that transition happen, and future generations will be able to enjoy the music and other Nash Holos programming that you currently do. To become a Patreon supporter, just go to www.patreon.com and search for Nash Holos. That's patron with an E, spelled Patreon. Or go to www.nashholos.com and click on the orange Patreon button on any page there. Thank you for listening and for your support. Щиро дякую.